I will never forget the day when, even though I was a millionaire, I realized that no amount of money could prepare someone for what I saw in those woods. A park ranger risking his own life to protect an elderly woman while a mountain lion advanced to attack. That scene still gives me goosebumps. But before I continue this story, comment below what you think. Give it a rating from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you are watching from. I really want to know if you like my story and to get to know you better. I never believed in change. Not really. I spent 42 years building an agribusiness empire, swallowing up land in West Texas like breathing air. The money came easy. The meaning, never. My name is Richard Sterling, and when I drove down that potholed dirt road deep in the high plains, I was just another rich man crossing the prairie like it was an old rug. The heat arrived before the sun. The air was as heavy as a wet blanket, and the smell of parched earth mixed with burning brush. I was in the back seat of my armored SUV, looking through the tinted windows, planning where to plant more cotton. To me, that twisted scrubland was just wasted space. That was when everything stopped. The driver hit the brakes suddenly. I looked up, annoyed, and saw the most unlikely scene of my life. A small, hunched, elderly woman standing in the middle of the path, and a few yards from her, in the shadows of the twisted mesquite trees, a magnificent and terrifying creature advanced in silence, body low, eyes fixed, muscles tense. Before I or my security detail could do anything, a man appeared out of nowhere. Worn-out uniform, no weapon, just presence. He placed himself between the threat and the old woman, raised his arms, and shouted with a force that cut through the air. The animal backed down. It dissolved into the shadows like smoke. I stepped out of the car trembling, not from fear, from shame. Because in 42 years of life, I had never seen anyone do something like that for another person without asking for anything in return. The man's name was Jack, a park ranger for the state conservation area. The woman was Miss Martha, a resident of a historic nearby freedmen's settlement, known as a folk healer and guardian of old wisdom. They walked away quickly, but something in me couldn't just move on. I asked Matthew, my trusted advisor, to investigate that ranger. I wanted to know who was capable of such bravery. What he found chilled me to the bone. Jack Hughes had been one of the top rising biologists in the state until he was pushed out of the university years prior, under unproven accusations of embezzling funds. He had requested a transfer to that remote outpost and lived alone in a wooden cabin, taking care of that patch of the plains as if it were all he had left. I told Matthew to dig deeper. I wanted to know who had ruined that man. The name that came up was mine. Not directly, but a company under my holding had financed, 5 years earlier, an expansion project that swallowed up part of the research area where Jack worked. To ensure the process went smoothly, someone had fabricated documents pointing to irregularities, and Jack's name was chosen to take the fall. The man behind the maneuver was Greg Sterling, my cousin and the group's financial director. I read that 3 times. I hadn't ordered it, but I had benefited without asking questions. And that distinction, I realized, didn't make me any less guilty. I tried one morning to go to the ranger station where Jack worked. I used the pretext of a technical visit. He received me with the coldness of someone who has learned not to expect anything from anyone. The conversation was short, dry like the air that afternoon. But before leaving, I casually mentioned Greg's name. Just the name, and I saw something change in his face, not anger, but recognition, and soon, suspicion. Jack spent the night awake. If that man knew Greg's name, what else did he know? Had he been sent to intimidate him? The next morning, he decided to look for Martha, because Martha, he sensed, was at the center of something bigger. The elderly woman was waiting for him on her porch with a plate of warm cornbread and a look that said it all. I knew you would come back. It was Martha who revealed that her daughter had worked as a legal assistant precisely at the firm that built the case against Jack. Before leaving, her daughter had kept a copy of compromising documents and trusted only her mother with the location, with the instruction to hand them over to the right man when the right time comes. The documents were hidden inside a tin coffee can under the old pecan tree in the backyard. Letters, spreadsheets, a cassette tape recording. enough material to destroy anyone. Before Jack could organize what he had in his hands, the situation worsened. Greg, tipped off by Matthew in a moment of misguided loyalty, sent 2 men to snoop around the area. It didn't take them long to find Martha's house. On an afternoon when the thermometer hit 111 degrees, Carl appeared at Martha's door with a fake smile and an offer to buy the land. She refused. He returned 2 days later with Alex, and the tone was no longer an offer. It was a warning. Jack, who had installed a two-way radio in the old woman's house as a precaution, heard everything from the station. He sprinted through the dry woods, arriving sweaty and out of breath. The confrontation was tense. Jack had no gun, but he had a voice, posture, and the authority of someone who knows every foot of that territory. He forced the two to back off, but he knew it wouldn't be the last time. 3 days later, a fire started on the edge of the reserve, too close to be a coincidence. The flames advanced through the night, and Jack, along with Anthony, another ranger who came to help, worked for 11 straight hours trying to contain the fire with flappers and makeshift fire lines. The heat was unbearable. The smoke burned their eyes. At one point, Jack lost contact with Anthony in the darkness and found himself alone, disoriented, in a stretch of the woods he no longer recognized. It was at that moment he felt, for the first time in years, that maybe it wasn't worth it, that he had come this far carrying a weight he had never asked for. He sat on the scorched ground among embers and ashes and cried without making a sound. But Anthony found him, and when the fire was finally contained at dawn, I was there too, with muddy boots and a burnt sleeve on my shirt, having arrived in the middle of the night and worked alongside the rangers without anyone asking. Nobody understood what had brought me there. I barely knew myself. I sought out Greg personally. The conversation took place in a closed room at the ranch. Nobody knew what was said. What was known is that Greg walked out visibly shaken, and in the following days began making strange moves, withdrawing funds, canceling contracts, acting like a man who feels the ground sinking. Jack, meanwhile, handed over the documents, not to me and not alone. He took Martha, he took Anthony as a witness, and went to the nearest town's police station accompanied by Priscilla, a young environmental lawyer that Martha had quietly contacted weeks before. The case was opened. The evidence was solid. But the bureaucracy was a river full of stones. Greg managed, through his lawyer, to get an injunction temporarily suspending the investigations. Jack received the news on a day when the heat had given them a break. The first light rain of the year had arrived early in the morning, and the smell of wet earth on the plains filled the air with something that felt like hope. Then the news arrived, and the smell was the same, but he couldn't feel it anymore. So I did what I had to do. I dissolved the partnership with Greg. I pulled the funding for his lawyers. I voluntarily handed over the internal financial records to the district attorney's office, documents that corroborated everything Jack had presented. I didn't make a speech. I didn't do it in public. I did it in silence, through Christine, my personal lawyer, on a Thursday afternoon with no cameras around. The injunction was lifted. The investigations resumed. Greg, realizing he was cornered, disappeared. He left the ranch, left his partners, left everything behind. Nobody knew where he went. But everyone who knew him understood that a man who builds his life on the suffering of others never finds a place where the past won't catch up to him. The following years showed him that with a precision no judicial sentence could have ever matched. Without the resources accumulated through fraud, without the allies who abandoned him as soon as they saw the winds shift, he slowly lost everything in pieces. The high plains don't forget, and time, when it's on the right side, is relentless. Jack was formally reinstated to the academic registry. He didn't return to the university. He didn't want to. He stayed on the plains, which was the only place where he had remained whole, even when the world tried to break him down. Martha stayed in her wood and mud house, healing anyone who arrived in pain and teaching the names of the plants to anyone who wanted to learn. She never thanked me in words, but the last time I drove past there, in a smaller truck, unarmored, alone, she left a mason jar of sweet tea on the gate with a handwritten note. The plains have a good memory too. I kept the note, and for the first time in 42 years I didn't buy anything that week. I just walked through the plains, with the cracked earth beneath my feet and the scent of desert marigolds in the air. The flower that blooms exactly in the driest months, when it seems like everything is going to die and the biome insists, stubborn and golden, on blooming anyway. I learned something money never bought, that there are encounters we don't choose but that choose us, that there are debts that don't show up on a balance sheet but weigh more than any property deed, and that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't change the world, but it changes who you are when you look in the mirror. 6 weeks were enough to turn my life inside out. 6 weeks between an unlikely encounter and the decision to stop running from the man I could have been. I didn't become a hero. I didn't become a saint. But I stopped being an accomplice. And that, I discovered, was already a new beginning. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.